The immature concept of God comes from seeing the Torah as a storybook, where you got the God of Abraham. Now God's having an argument with Abraham's having an argument with God to like save the city of Sodom, who are up to no good. And God's like clearly a punishing God because he's going to destroy the city of Sodom because of people misbehaving in Sodom, which is, I guess in English they call it Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, I think the Sodom has something to do with the sodomy, but but what's interesting about it is sodium is is salt, and sodium's all you get down there at the Dead Sea. Everything down there where Sodom and Gomorrah was is salt today. You ever thought about that? That Sodom is where all the sodium is. It's just a massive like salt area. And but when you read those stories, you think of God as this God who's like, he's like a wheeler and dealer. Abraham's saying, if there's a couple holy people in there, maybe you wouldn't destroy the place. He's a wheeler and dealer. He's a punisher. He's a rewarder. He's clearly got it in for certain people. And then later, God becomes the God of Torah and Mount Sinai. And now all of a sudden you got 613 commandments, which is 365 thou shalt not do, which breaks down to about 30,000 laws, and 248 thou shalt do, which breaks down to about 15,000 laws. Altogether, it's 45,000 laws. But what can easily happen is your concept of God is just this God of deal making, reward and punishment, and a God who's like super concerned about like how you comb your hair, basically. Meaning it's a God who's involved in like your tiniest details. And how do you maintain a mature concept of God, and what is a mature concept of God? Now, we're going to go into a mature concept of God, and what you're going to realize in working on that, on a mature concept of God, you're going to have to somehow make it work with a God of Torah. Like it's going to somehow have to be the same God, because we're not going to have two gods. We're not going to have the storybook God of the Torah with everything it says, and a mature concept of God be two separate gods. They're going to be in the end one. And some of the greatest thinkers in the world, some of the really great thinkers, I don't know if you guys heard the thinker named Alan Watts. You've heard of Alan Watts? Anyway, if you listen to Alan Watts, you'll grow a lot in your maturity of thought. But even the greatest, maturest thinkers can't help but consider the God of Israel as a petty God, built by some kind of patriarchy to cause conformity and control. You understand that it's somehow built to control us. And I heard a recent great quote. I think Jordan Peterson said it. He's another great thinker who I think has probably put it all together. But Jordan Peterson, he said recently, he said, religion is an organization that makes sure you don't have any religious experiences. Which is a very interesting thing to say. I'm going to say that again. Religion is, I think he was quoting Carl Jung, that religion is an organization that makes sure you don't have any religious experiences. Because what does it mean to have a religious experience? Is that, I mean, in your daily life of order, with order and chaos, in your daily life of order, would you call having a truly religious experience, like a freak out experience? Would that be part of your order, or would that be more towards chaos? Which one? It'd be total chaos. I mean, if you had a truly religious experience, like a real God experience, which in my family, we actually, once in a while, one of my kids would yell out, "Let's have a God experience, 1, 2, 3. And then the whole family, what we do is we all scream at the top of our lungs, which is an actual form of service of God, which is called primal scream. And I'm actually part of an ecstatic prayer group in Jerusalem that is a primal scream group. And so you should know that each one of you has a voice inside that you've never even met. Never met. Very few people. I brought a guest. Someone wanted to do the primal scream prayers with us. Really sweet guy from Mexico City. He's been observant for years. He actually came over Thursday to learn. Was that Friday? Friday, to learn Kabbalah with me. And he's an older guy and he wanted to learn Kabbalah. And so I taught him a Kabbalah class. And later I invited him to do the extreme prayer. He couldn't do it. Because until you've met your primal scream, you don't just walk in and find it. It's something you have to achieve. And I bet most of you have never even heard that voice come out of you. Anyway, but in my family, sometimes a kid will yell out, "Let's have a God experience," and they'll yell 1, 2, 3, and the whole family just goes, "Bah!" And then we'll be silent and just feel Hashem. We'll just feel Hashem right there. But it's chaos. It's chaos. If you want to go for God experiences, it's chaos. But what would you do if you created a tradition of Judaism where it's all about chaos? How do you control the group? Who's in charge here? You know, if the name of the game of your group is chaos, in order to produce God experiences, and who says my God experience is going to be different than your God experience, and now you're going to have your God experience? So what tradition do we follow now? Because everyone's having their own God experience. So like, what's real now? Well, wouldn't it be a lot easier just to create a really dumbed down, boring, quiet prayer service where everyone reads the page, quietly to themselves for the most part, and stays very much in their space, and be normal, as they say. Be normal. Well, there's not going to be a God experience there, except for, obviously, the person who knows how to go in. Because there is such a thing as inner God experience. So the guy who knows how to go in, the woman who knows how to go in, will have their God experience, because certainly going crazy in prayers, going out to get to it, but there's also going in. Now, not every person's so good at going in, because there's 3 types of people. There's intellectuals, I call them ones. They're good at going in. There are interpersonals, which love people, not good at going in. And last are the third types, which are the instinctuals. Those are like the earth people. And they're good at going in, but only when they're like hiking barefoot. Not in a prayer setting. It's way too many words on that page for the instinctual types. And again, every human being is either one of those 3. I mean, you have all 3, but one of them's your major. So you either major in intellectual ideas, or you major in people, or you major in things. So for example, I'm a 2-3-1. I'm mostly people, then I'm things. That's why I'm mountain biking, and in that room over there is probably one of the nicest mountain bikes in the country, because the nicer your mountain bike, the less you fall. Okay, and I don't want to fall at this point in my life. And really, the nicer your mountain bike, the less you have a mountain bike. Because think about it, if your mountain bike's just perfectly making it through the mountains, it doesn't really exist, does it? Meaning, if your suspension and drivetrain are completely perfected for the terrain you're in, is there really a bike? Is there even a bike under you? Anyway, that's a fun thought for all the 3s. 1s are like, why are you even talking about bikes? 2s are like, where are all the people? And 3 is me racing through the mountains on my mountain bike, and afterwards going to get a sauna, having jumped in a spring before the sauna. And not to mention a cold beer. But all those are instinct people. Those are 3s. Now, it turns out 45% of the world are 2s, and 45% of the world are 3s. Meaning 45% of the world are people. 45% of the people are instinctual people, meaning they like the physical world. They're into that. And by the way, I happen to know what everyone is in this room right now. And I'm just watching all you guys. I'm watching the ones, wonder what in the hell's going on in here. I'm watching the twos, enjoy me enjoying myself. And I'm watching the threes, enjoy me talking about things like mountain biking and being out in the forest and like, you know, and I'm just literally, your facial muscles are working exactly according to what, as I talk about this, I'm watching your facial muscles move. Each of you are firing as I'm talking about ones, twos, and threes. So it turns out only 10% of people are ones. So everyone who thinks they're going to go in with prayer and read thousands of words, if he's not one of that 10 percentile who could go in on that, he's not even there. He's just not even there. That's the guy who's always coming late to prayer because he wants to do the bare minimum, get in, get out without any, without, dying of boredom. And hence ecstatic prayer sends you to, ecstatic prayer awakens the spirit within. And for that reason, threes should definitely be involved in a much more ecstatic prayer. And twos enjoy it because there's a bunch of people around. So me being a 2-3-1, I'm in a Hasidic shul with a couple hundred people. We're all in pretty tight. And you'd probably be thinking like, I don't want to be that tight with everybody. But if you're a 2, you actually like being with lots of people all around you. So I like being close. In fact, even when I'm in my silent prayer, and I've got a guy brushing up on either side of me, and I'm in full-on meditation. I mean, deep, deep meditation. So it's a distraction to have someone next, like touching you. While they're like, my talus is like touching other taluses in, when it's really packed in there. But I just put it as part of my meditation that like, I don't know where he's at and I don't know where he's at, but I'm with them, like they're, like we're touching. Like I'm actually in full meditation, touching these other Jews who've been screaming bloody murder for the last hour and a half. And now we finally entered into the silent meditation. And it's a very deep place. But it makes us ungovernable. You understand that this is something that I just want to give honor to the Hasidic communities. Not every Hasidic community, but certainly the ones that are chaos. The ones that allow chaos in their community, like it's built in that there should be chaos, you got to hand it to those people. One example, there's a rabbi in Jerusalem named Rabbi Zilverberg, and he's one of the great teachers of Israel and very alternative prayer group. So not only do you have full volume, and they got a lot of song. We don't do song, we only do scream, but they got song. But they also, everyone gets their own space, and in your space, you get to do whatever you want. Like there are no rules to what you do in your space. So people are really using their space, and it's pretty cool. So at one point during the prayers, I noticed that there was a tallis on the floor, a prayer shawl on the floor. So I went to pick it up, and right when I went to pick up the prayer shawl, because I was in my prayer, so I just kind of leaned down like that to pick up the prayer shawl, someone pushed my arm away. I'm like, what was that? I'm just trying to pick up a tallis from the floor. And then I look back, and I see, it's not just a tallis on the floor. There's a person under the tallis, and he's shaking. So it's the tallis going like this. It's like quivering underneath the tallis in the middle. We're in the middle of morning prayers on Shabbos. And anyway, I continue praying, and I notice after a while that the Rabbi Zilverberg, is not at his podium for quite some time. So I was thinking that it was kind of interesting that he took such a long break. The Rebbe of the community like disappeared in like the height of the davening. Anyway, it was only a matter of like maybe 40 minutes. I mean, these people were going for the 2 hours intensity. About 40 minutes in, I see the tallis start to move again. The guy gets up, and guess who it is? It's the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe himself's flat on his face, shaking, convulsively shaking for a half hour straight underneath a tallis on the floor in the middle of the shul, like not even where he was standing at the beginning, at the front of the shul. That level of ecstatic prayer is religious experience. I know I never use the word religious, so I apologize. I'm only using it because Carl Jung said the famous quote, which is that organized religion has to do everything to make sure you don't have a religious experience if they're going to keep control over you. So I'm calling this God experience a religious experience. The reason I don't use the word religion, normally I'll just let you know. The reason I don't use the word religion is because religion is something you wished were true. And meaning it's a mythology that people who believe in it wish it were true. And they believe it's true. And they might even risk their life or sacrifice much for it. But Judaism isn't that way. Judaism is literally just a history of the people. We're a history of a people. A nation born in another nation, 10 plagues, split sea, Mount Sinai, and then 40 years in the desert, come to Israel. I mean, there's no point where you have to start believing in anything. There's no guy in a cave you believe in that he said something. There's no apostles that you got to believe they saw what they saw. You're never believing anyone saw what they saw, because the entire thing is just simply the history of our people. The entire thing is only the history of our people from the beginning till today. And if you backed it up 100 years, all you'd get is just Judaism in the 1900s. And if you backed it up 100 years, you get Judaism in the 1800s. If you backed it up 1,000 years, you'd have Judaism in the middle, in the, whatever you call those times. I don't know history, so I would just call it the time of the Rishonim. And if you back it up 1,000 years, you would be at the Second Temple period. And if you backed it up another 500 years, you'd be in Persia with the Jewish people and the whole story of the Persian Empire and the Jews and the story of Purim. And if you backed it up a couple hundred more years, you're in the First Temple period. If you back it up another couple hundred years, you got King David, and we already have his coins. We have, you understand, we have all that stuff. The archaeologists, the biggest atheist archaeologists in the world, don't deny David's existence as the king of Israel. And you back it up a few hundred years, and you got the period of time where we're conquering the land of Israel, and you back it up just a little bit more. You're literally on the shores of the Jordan River with Moses passing away and Joshua taking the baton and leading the Jews into the land of Israel. Like, at what point? And if you back it up a little, those 40 years more, you're at the surround sound OmniMax 3D LSD Sinai experience. So it's like, and at the Sinai experience, there's 3 million people there. If you look in the Torah, it says 600,000 men between 20 and 50. If you add the children, you add the elderly, and you add the women, you're 3 million Jews. That's the math. So it's 3 million Jews are there. Who are you believing? And who could have ever started such a thing? At what point did they start it? You understand? It was always this civilization called Israel. Our emunah is not belief. Our emunah is just our history. And in fact, you'll notice whenever we do the evening service, Ma'ariv, what do you say after Shema Yisrael? You say, Ve'emunah kol zois. Ve'emunah kol zois. And what's after the word zois is a colon. It says, and this is our faith. And then what's after the colon? Our history. It's a long paragraph of our history. Just goes through everything the Jewish people ever went through in our history. It's just our history. Now, let's go a little bit deep into the mature concept of God. I'm going to give over quickly the 4-second proof of God. You guys ever heard of proof of God in 4 seconds? No, you never heard it? Does someone here have a smartphone with a timer? Because I used to call it the 5-second proof of God, but I got it down to 4. So I'm like redoing it now. It's the 4-second proof of God. So get your stopwatch ready. Okay, it's got a little background. So the 4-second proof of God. Have you guys heard the 4-second proof of God? I gave over this proof of God to a PhD class of MIT physicists. Can you imagine? Like, that's a lot of fun to be able to give this class to MIT physicists, like 50 MIT physicists. And I only got one argument, and I put down that argument with one line. I got one, meaning one guy raised his hand, he had an argument, and it was a very short argument, and I was able to, you know, what would they say on YouTube? Destroy his argument with one simple line. Ready? So here it goes. I just got to give it a little background before we get to the 4-second proof of God, and that is just to understand what I mean by nothing. So like you might say there's nothing in this cup, right? Nothing. So is there nothing in the cup? Is this cup empty or full? No, it's full. What's it got in it? Air. It's got air. So that's just interesting in general, is that we don't really have a concept of nothing. You know, like your brain went to nothing. Meaning your brain can go there, but it's pretty interesting, the whole thought of nothing. You know, like what is nothing exactly? But I think nothing was introduced to the world by the Big Bang. The Big Bang, which is the #1 biggest... can anyone help me with the word kasha in English?
The food?
It's the #1 kasha of atheists against atheists. The Big Bang is the #1 kasha against atheists. What's the word kasha?
Maybe objection?
What?
Antithesis.
Antithesis? No.
Question.
#1 biggest question? Maybe question is the simplest way to say it, because the word kasha in Hebrew is such a stronger, in the word kasha is often translated as an attack question. Meaning the issue, the kasha is uprooting what you believe to be true. So for example, atheists who believe there's no God have this attack called the Big Bang. And what's funny about this is Jews who are raised observant, they often think that, Jews who are raised observant think the Big Bang's like a kasha on Judaism. Why? Because the Torah says the world's 6,000 years old. And so if the Big Bang says the world's 15 billion years old, so that means that the world's not 6,000 years old, which means maybe the Torah is not true. Right? You hear the kasha? So then they just think the Big Bang's like this major kasha on Judaism, which means it's a kasha on God. But it turns out that the biggest kasha, the #1 kasha on atheism is the Big Bang. Why? Because the Big Bang means that there was a beginning. If there was a beginning, that means there was a before the beginning. Now, what would be before the beginning of matter? What would be before the beginning of matter? It begins with an N. O-T-H-I-N-G. What is it? Together?
Nothing.
Nothing. And you'll notice in those bastards, I don't want to call them bastards because they were trying to teach us when we were kids. But when I was a kid growing up, we were given the Big Bang as a fact, not as a theory. We were given it as a fact. And they always started it with a little tiny piece of matter that banged. They didn't talk about the fact that that little piece of matter would have to be created. So here we were, kids being told as a fact about the Big Bang instead of it being a theory. And they were already putting the little piece of matter in there, which is cheating. You understand? That's a major discussion. Where did the little piece of matter come from, mister? But we were little kids and we were like, okay, I guess we're just supposed to believe in this. But the bottom line is, for atheists, is that the Big Bang is a major kasha. what's the kasha? Is that if there was absolutely nothing, so what did God use to create the world? If there was nothing, what's the world made out of? If there was nothing, could there ever be something? Meaning, let's just say that I could somehow scientifically suck the air out of this cup. I suck the air out of the cup. Of course, the cup would collapse, but if I suck the air out of the cup, hermetically seal it, and we come back a year later, what's in the cup? Let's say there's nothing in the cup. I come back a year later, what's in the cup? Everyone say nothing, please. Can you say it a little louder? Nothing. Even louder? Nothing. 1, 2, 3. If there was, so we come back a year later. What would be in the cup 1,000 years later?
The flip side of the cup.
What?
The outside of it. What's that?
Yeah, that would be there.
Still the cup.
I understand.
All this time you thought there was nothing, but then there was what's behind the cup.
Yeah, that's a very deep thought, actually. And we could go there right now, but right now I'm just trying to get everyone to say nothing. Okay? Now, we come back a year later, what's in the cup? Nothing. What's in the cup 1,000 years later? Nothing. Million years later? Nothing. Trillion? Gazillion? Nothing. What does nothing make? Together? What does nothing make? Nothing. What does nothing make? Everyone say nothing. Nothing. If you have nothing, what does it make? Nothing. Before there was something, what was there? Nothing.
That we know of.
No, nothing. Nothing we can understand that we know. Yeah, nothing that we would ever be able to understand. Don't forget, your mind is, like you're saying, what's your name? Avital, like you're saying, Avital, the mind is couched in space and time. It's really interesting to think about that, because we're all like dedicating our lives to this being. That's not a thing. And your mind could never get around it. It's like, what are you even doing? What are you even doing? Dedicating your life to God, who is nothing your mind could ever conceive. You know, imagine if I had no concept of my wife. Could I be in a relationship with her? But meanwhile, I'm in this super dedicated relationship with a being, and I have no idea what it is. I'm already hinting a little bit of what the Torah is. Remember what our original question was: how can a mature thinker have a biblical version of God? You know, that was, I don't know, those who came in late, that was our original question. How can a mature thinker have a biblical version of God? But how can a mature thinker have any concept of God? And the answer is you can't. You can't have a concept of God. All we know is that it was nothing, and we know nothing makes nothing. Now, the fact that nothing made something, the fact that we're in a physical universe that's expanding, we're in this gigantic space-time continuum that started at one point and is moving in an expanded universe fashion from nothing, means that whatever the nothing was is what we would call G-D. So you ready for the 4-second proof of God? Get your timers ready. Here we go. 1. You're going to record it. What's your name again?
Benny.
Oh, I never got your name. Did I get your name? Benny. Benny, ready? Okay. On 3. Ready? I got to get this in 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Before there was something, there was nothing, and since nothing makes nothing, and now there's something that must be, nothing was God. 4?
4:45.
Oh, that's terrible. Let's try it again. Ready? Start again. No, I got it in 4 yesterday. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Before there was something, there was nothing, and since nothing makes nothing, now there's something that must be, nothing was God.
376.
Yes! The 3-second proof of God. 376. You guys got the proof of God? Shall I slow it down? Okay, you guys will help me. Just say nothing again. And don't forget to say something at one point. So, before there was something, there was nothing. And since
Nothing.
Made
Nothing.
since nothing makes nothing, and now that there's something, it must be that the nothing was God. At which point the MIT physicist raised his hand amongst 50 physicists. The guy raised his hand and says, and his friends were really happy about this because someone had to stop me. Someone had to stop me. And I'll explain why in a second. And he raises his hand and he says, a rabbi, you know, it's a little presumptuous to call the nothing God. And that was his kasha. And my answer back to him was, tell me, Mr. Physicist, what does God mean? And his face contorted a little and he thought. And he looked at me and he says, touché. You see, there's two versions of God. There is a immature version of God, which is like it's Bozo the Clown somewhere outside space and time. And there's a mature concept of God, which is the one we're discussing right now. And so the physicist who raised his hand and says it's a little presumptuous that you call that God, I bet you that guy as a kid had like, I don't know, some kind of biblical upbringing. I don't know if he was raised Muslim or raised he's Jewish. I don't know if he was raised Christian. But he was raised in some kind of a biblical narrative God. And so for me to call the nothing, that's, as Avital said, is completely inconceivable, to give it that biblical name to that physicist was a kasha. You really think I can use, Atari, you really think I can use the word question?
Query?
Kasha is such a stronger attack, you know. But you understand, that was his kasha, which is what we're talking about today. And I know I've been weaving this tapestry, and you guys probably thought I was talking about all different kinds of things this whole time, and it's like, but I wasn't. Do you get that? You realize I've been talking about one thing this whole entire time, which is what I opened with, is how do you have a mature concept of God while still having a biblical concept of God? And another thing that we got to already is, another thing we got to already is that if you have the mature concept of God, you can't have a relationship with it. Other than, obviously, a very kind of more Buddhist being relationship, because if you were to go to your deepest state of being, and I could lead you guys in breath work and take you there, because anyone can go there. But if you went to your deepest state of being, and I would suggest if you wanted to do that, you should be celibate and fast for a couple years. Meaning leave the world. And then maybe you could leave the world enough that you left the world to the before the world, to the nothingness, and then you could be in a relationship. And weird that this book says, like, be fruitful and multiply? What? Like, that's the first thing in the whole book? What? Why would that be the first thing? I mean, here's this being that's so big that there's no way even to have a concept of it to begin to have a relationship with it, who happens to be an author, gives a book. You get the book, you open the book, you're expecting something deep, and the very first thing it tells you is like, here's something fun. Be fruitful and multiply. And it's like, okay, it looks good on the cover. You know, like the first page, I guess God put that there so you'd keep reading. But it's an iceberg commandment. It's a real iceberg commandment. You know what an iceberg is? Iceberg, you know, you see the little cute little iceberg. You take a trip to Alaska, you see the iceberg. And the tour guide's like, see that iceberg over there? And you're like, yeah, that thing's huge. What is that, 200 feet? He's like, no, it's about 2 miles. 2 miles? No, it's 200 feet probably. See, yeah, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg, man. That thing's 2 miles. So you go ahead and you be fruitful and multiply, and next thing you know, there's only one way to be fruitful and multiply, and not have your kids turn into absolute animals, and that's marriage. Well, marriage is about 6 tractates of the Talmud. And now these kids are coming, because, right, the only way to have kids is you got to have a couple. The only way to have a couple is you're going to have marriage. And the only way to have marriage is to have a contract. Because if there's no consequences in a relationship, the relationship will not last, because people are messed up people. People are crazy, including everyone in this room and myself included. We're nuts. And if we don't have a contract with consequences, there's no way we'd stay married to that crazy person. And so you got to have couples. It's telling us to have kids. Now you got to have kids. But now that you got kids, man, you ain't no Buddhist monk, because you got to feed those kids. And if you're going to have to feed those kids, you're going to have to work. And you're also going to need a home. And once you got to feed kids, and once you're going to have work, and once you're going to have a home, well, you're going to need 3 more tractates. You're going to need Baba Kama, you're going to need Baba Metzia, and you're going to need Baba Basra, which is real estate law, to put those kids. Not to mention some real estate to put your business, or to put your farm, or to put, and you're going to have neighbors, and there might be discussions about whose line is, where's the line of our property? That's going to be Baba Basra. Now you're back in the Talmud again. And how can I have a relationship with a being who's inconceivable, unless there's the stories in the Torah that talk about the interaction of Adam, of Shais, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, all the way down to Noah and his son and the flood. Was there really a flood? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, clearly there was some kind of flood, but it doesn't matter for what we're talking about. Meaning in our subject, does it matter? But it's certainly talking about a generation of people that lost their way. And the next thing you know, like, flood time. You lose your way, flood time. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah. A civilization lost their way. Flood time. Both stories speak about a loss of the original sexual union of male and female, meaning it gets confused over there. And then the civilization's wiped out, like gone. I suggest you guys Google ancient artwork of civilizations that have disappeared. Any civilization that's disappeared, you want to hear something crazy? Every civilization that's ever existed in the world, if you look at their artwork, which could go all the way back to cave paintings, certainly the artist was good enough to create a male or a female figure. You understand? I wouldn't say they're the most sophisticated artists in the world, but you can figure out if it's a man or a woman in the cave paintings. Right before a civilization disappears, you'll notice that the artwork goes gender neutral, and then they're gone. That civilization is wiped off the world. Meaning, we know about the flood, we know about Sodom and Gomorrah, but we know that every civilization that has ever disappeared in the history of the world right before the end, right at the point where they had so lost their moral compass that the world turns like non-binary, and then it's gone. The Torah's stories are teaching us stories from God that He chose for us to understand Him, to understand lessons, to understand relationship. And by the way, if there was another planet out there, or even multiple planets out there with life, If there were other planets out there with life, they would have God. It would be the exact same God that created the world. The same nothing that made this place. And you want to hear something interesting? They could have a totally different Torah based on their experiment, because we're clearly God's experiment here. So they could have a totally different system. They might not have even gotten the Torah. You know why they might not have gotten the Torah? Because, think about it, why do we need a Torah?
They never ate from the tree.
Maybe they never ate from the tree, but then they would never really gotten started. You know, many elders would never discuss the free will story of Adam and Eve. It's an amazing thing. Because if you read the story, they're clearly tested. So there's free will, no? Shouldn't we teach free will from Adam and Eve? Except what? Could he have not sinned, Adam? Could we have this discussion? meaning his sin was absolutely necessary for the creation. It's part of the creation. So you'll notice most elders will never discuss free will in the ultimate free will story. So it should be a discussion of free will, yet if you look through the Torah, you see that the sages don't want to discuss that as a free will story, which is amazing, discussion in itself, is why that story is not up to free will discussion. But again, nothing happens without it. I want to answer the question, why would a planet somewhere else not have gotten the Torah? So I want to take you guys real deep for a second, and then if you guys have questions, we'll open to questions. We're going to go real deep for a second. God created the world with light. Okay? What do physicists say the world's made of? Anyone studying physics? What's the world made of?
Waves, particles, vibrations, energy.
There's a word right before energy. You're good.
Matter.
Right before the word energy, it's two words. The word's light. Yeah, the world's made of light.
Light.
Yeah, light energy. Yeah, the world's made of light energy. All the waves and all the particles are all a flow of light energy. Yeah, the world's made of light. You can look at physics later and check out what the world's made of. But the world's made of light energy. What do the Kabbalists say the world's made out of? What does Kabbalah teach us for thousands of years?
Light.
The world's made of light. What do the physicists say the world's made out of?
Light.
Oh, the world's made of light. Okay. Well, if God creates the world out of light, do you realize that the light would kind of overtake us? Could you exist? Could you exist in that light without it being filtered? Not at all. You could never be able to exist. And right now I only have overhead lights, which is terrible for filming, but can you see my hand over here? Oh, maybe the board. You see the shadow there on the board? So we got light, and I'm now filtering that light, and now we have image, matter. Okay? You can't have matter unless the light's filtered out, because the light makes light. Okay? Light makes more light. Light makes more light. Light makes light. It's like a bulldozer. Okay? Anything that makes it is. So how does God ever make a world if the whole world's made of light? Answer, by filtering the light energy. Well, how do you filter light energy? Well, you create waves. You create patterns. You limit it so that there can be something other than light. Now, of course, what would happen if the light shut off right now? What would happen to the image? But my hand's still there. So it's very interesting. Is my hand creating the image, or is the light creating the image? Yeah, it's a deep thing to think about. What's really making this place? And the answer is the light's really making this place. The settings of our world are specific to our world. You can't see through this place. Before Adam and Eve ate from the fruit, they could see through it. Adam named everything in the garden. When I say named everything in the garden, he didn't name the dog Elmo. Meaning he named it Kelev. He named it Kalev, loyal. The word Kalev, like a heart, loyal. He saw everything, but he saw everything, traced it all the way into the light, and then was able to see how the holy 22 letters wove their way into that particular thing, and then named it. And that's why the Torah says, whatever he named it was its name. It's like, what else are we going to think? There was no one else around that was its name, as opposed to what everyone else was calling it. There was no one else. Why does the Torah say it was its name? Because Adam saw from this edge all the way up to the light edge, saw how it wove its way through the filters into dog, into Kelev. That's how our world works. It's filtered light.
This filtered light become hard math.
We could go deeper about it, but let's just say like this. What if the light went off right now, Miss Phillips? What would happen to that? Meaning, what would happen to you? What would happen to you? What would happen to you if the light went off?
Which light?
The big light. The Hashem light.
Yeah.
You're gone. What would be left of you if the light went off? Well, there'd be nothing left of you. But what if he switched the settings a little bit and let a little light through? What if a little more light came through? What would we all experience if God just turned down the filter 10% and allowed like 10% more light to come through? Do you think anyone in here would have a doubt there's a God?
Yes.
No, I'm saying you're now seeing through things. Things just turn translucent, which means what you'd be seeing is letters. I mean, you would see the vibrational energy inside of the thing. And I don't know if you know this now, but check this out online. This will blow you away. Is all the scientists, meaning the evolutionary scientists, today, right now, check this out online. Go on YouTube and check this out. All the top evolutionary scientists are giving up on evolution because they're finally finding out that no matter how much they trace the chromosomes of DNA, no matter how much they trace it back, it always comes back to intelligence.
So what are they?
Meaning they now have discovered that it's so complex that it's only intelligence at its base. That it doesn't come to simplicity. It just boils down to intelligence, which is just beyond. But that's what's happening now. That's where we're at. So if God changed the settings and just turned down like 10% of the filter, would there be a non-believer on earth? There wouldn't be a non-believer on earth. There would be a burglar on his way up the back wall of a house full of sleeping people. And the husband, of course, hears the burglar. And like quickly gets up and he's like, oh my gosh, he doesn't have a gun. And the guy already cut the electricity to the house. And he also burned out their Wi-Fi and stuff, and they're way up in the hills. There's no cell. They were just going off Wi-Fi. And the husband's freaking out. And while I'm talking like this, all of a sudden God says, okay, Rabbi Yom Tov, I'll give you 10% for an hour. 10% off the filter for an hour. The guy gets to the window of the master bedroom and sees the husband. They're looking at each other in the window. And all of a sudden the burglar just starts sobbing. And he's loaded. He's going to kill the guy. He was going to kill the guy. They just start sobbing. The owner quickly undoes the window. He shouldn't fall. Pulls him into the house and they're hugging. And that's why the other planets out there might not have gotten a Torah. Because who says their settings are like ours? We've got very strong settings here of more filter than light. There are meditative practices that create more light than filter. There are breathing practices that can create more light than filter. There are chemical compounds and even natural compounds that create more light than filter. So people do have access. And now with our understanding in physics, and now with our understanding of so much, so that's why those civilizations on other planets, which I don't say exist, I'm saying if they existed, may not have needed the Torah, because they wouldn't have had the same settings we have. And they would have already worked it out on their particular planet. If they did have similar settings to us, would their Torah read the same? Moses, Isaac, Jacob, Abraham, would their Torah have the same words? No. Totally different words. And you might be disappointed, you know, if you were on that spaceship and you went up to that planet and you're like, you know, and we brought a rabbi with us. And the rabbi's like, did you ever get a book by any chance, like at some point in your history? And they're like, we did. And they're like, yes. So they pull out their scroll, and it's totally different words. He'd be like, oh, what a disappointment. But then he says to him, hey, do you happen to have mystics in your community? And like, of course we have mystics. They live up in some mountaintop called Tzfat. Oh, amazing. They have the same. We also have a mystical mountain called Tzfat. Hey, that's great. So, turns out that on the spaceship, he was still meditating, but one of the mystics from the mountains of Tzfat came out of the spaceship. And he met the mystics on the mountaintops of this mountain. And they open up their scrolls and they start teaching the secrets behind the words of the stories. Because they had their stories and they had their stories. Different stories. But they start teaching the secrets that are underneath the stories. And guess what? It's the same Torah. It's the same exact Torah. Because the Torah we're reading is not just to teach the stories so that you learn how to have a relationship with a being that you can't have a relationship with because it's inconceivable except for that which the prophecy of Torah teaches us how to interact with this being. But it also has in it, embedded in it, the secrets of the creation itself. The actual secrets of the entire creation are all within those letters, which are numbers, which is a system of strobing light, which is ultimately our world. Well, I could take questions. Any questions?
How's the existence?
Yeah, here comes the questions. Okay, we'll start with you.
How's the existence of the world in space and time not a contradiction?
How's the you have to ask again because a tractor just drove by.
How is the existence of a world which is comprised of space and light and things that are very finite and not a contradiction to God, who is infinite, should have encompassed that space?
So we didn't go there, but I'll just say it quickly, since we already went pretty far. Before there was something, there was nothing. Okay, what did we call that nothing?
God.
God. If all there was God, what did God use to create the world? If all there was God, what did God use to create the world? Himself. So you think this world's finite. This world ain't finite. It's not finite. It's all part of God. Isn't it interesting that all of us came from absolute nowhere also? Think about it. You're like one day became this conscious being. You were in the mother's womb, so you had no way to really understand what was happening, but like you came from nothing. And what's humanity's biggest fear? What's the biggest fear besides public speaking?
Annihilation?
Yeah.
Death. But meanwhile, you've never met a person who didn't. Meaning, what is the fear of death? The fear of death is that everything you are and everything you've made will amount to zero, to nothing. Yet you've never met a person who didn't start off from there and doesn't seem upset about it whatsoever. We all came from nothing, and we're all pretty cool with it. You know, like no one, I've never seen anyone have any anxiety over the fact that they came from absolute nothing.
It's the same fear.
And we all, what's that?
It's the same fear. That I come from nothing and therefore I go to nothing.
Right. Exactly, but it's just weird because everyone seems pretty cool with the fact that they came from nothing.
Because we're future obsessed.
We're future. Well, we're obsessed about not going back to nothing. Like, I don't mind coming from it. I don't want to go to it. You know, but it's just very interesting, and it's also very interesting that you have an eye called a consciousness. Like you have an eye in there, and that eye has never been found in science. They can't find it in brain scans. Not an MRI. The brain scientists. Did you know this is the second biggest kasha, the second biggest attack question of atheists? The number one biggest question is, where did this world come from if there was nothing? The second biggest question is consciousness. The truth is they have a third one that they say before, but only because they believe it came before, which is organic life. They don't understand how organic life came from gases, you know, like hydrogen or whatever. They don't get that. You know, like, what's his name? Who's the biggest atheist in London? Richard Dawkins said, they said if you had three questions you got answers to, what would the three be? He said, where did the world come from? Where did organic matter come from? And where did consciousness come from? Those are the three biggest kashas, obviously, on atheism. And he's the most outspoken atheist. But one thing I just want to develop that for a sec is that, what was I saying right before that? Consciousness. Oh, consciousness is not from here. And you have it. So you have this eye that's clearly conscious. It's not part of your body, but yet it seems to follow you around. And for those who pray, we have two words for that. We say it several times a day. You know what the words are? Who knows what the two words we say to recognize the miracle that your eye follows around your bag of bones? Why does you ever notice that? Like no matter how fast you run, you can't seem to get ahead of this bag of bones. Your consciousness always hangs around it. You know what the two words are that we mention it as a miracle every day? Multiple times. No? No? The words are umafli lasos. Umafli, which means to wonder, and the word lasos is an action, meaning he acts wondrously. When you click on the words, he acts wondrously. He's mafli lasos. He causes wonder. Is when you click on those two words, it's actually about the fact that your eye hangs around your bag of bones. Now, what happens when your bag of bones dies? You think the eye dies? Your eye has nothing to do with the bag of bones. The miracle is that it even hangs around it. When you die, when the body is no longer limiting you, which is what it does, you know, think about what your body's doing to your eye. Your eye is part of the big eye. The big guy. Your eye is part of the big eye. And your body limits it. It has you in here like as if this world is all there is. Very interesting to think about. I'll tell you one thing it does. It takes away your fear of death. It doesn't take away your fear of a grotesque death, but it does take your fear away of death, meaning no longer being in this bag of bones here. But you understand, like the Jewish concept of consciousness and God, consciousness being a part of God. It's a chilek, a portion of godliness inside of you. Means it's eternal, which makes you automatically not afraid of death. You can't be afraid of death and be a fully practicing Jew. Again, it doesn't help much for an awful death. Awful deaths suck, no matter how you slice it. But yeah, I mean, we have some kind of teachings that it's it helps with the next world, I guess, because you do have to pay the piper for your stupid moves in this world. So something about an awful death is like better for you for some reason, but I'll pass. I'll go without the awful death, please. Yeah, and I've already, I've been through so much with my extreme sports and various other extreme chaos activities that I think I've had plenty of awful deaths already. And I hope I'm done with my awful deaths and I just prefer to have my family all around me, and I'll be really old and I'll cry and bless each kid and tell them how much I love them. And I'm hoping that they'll record it, because not for them, for that they could play it live to the people, because when I walk around and people keep interrupting whatever I'm doing, which is usually just trying to get somewhere, and they say what a difference these classes made for them, it makes more of a difference for me to go to bed every night knowing I made that difference for people. And I always, the only reason I say this is to let you know what a difference you make. And if you aren't making that difference already, start to. Because that's how bad it is out there. That's how bad it is out there. And if you need more wisdom to start making that difference, so by all means be selfish now and get it. Go learn and gather your wisdom so that you can make a difference for people. Avital, you had a question? That was a long answer, but it's all God. This is an illusion. Yeah?
Far away from my question, but I guess it's going back to the removal of the light. And the question is, in regards to Sinai, is that removal of light?
Removal of filter.
Filter?
The Mount Sinai experience for the first 2 commandments was removal of filter.
And all light? No.
I mean, not all. If there was all light, then our whole world would have been blasted to light. So it wasn't all light. God does have a dial. So if God wanted to if he wanted, right now we're on lot of filter. So Mount Sinai was very little filter. It was so little filter that our sages say, first of all, Mount Sinai was bigger than the splitting of the sea. And our sages say that at the splitting of the sea, the most simple handmaid, meaning she was a handmaid she was a servant in Egypt. A servant in Egypt of some wealthy family. Like the most simple handmaid in Egypt saw a greater visage of God, meaning she had a higher prophecy, just walking through the sea. Just walking through the sea on dry land. She had a greater prophetic experience than Ezekiel, who, I don't know how much you know about Ezekiel, but Ezekiel the prophet saw the chariot, that if you started studying the Kabbalah about this chariot from this day forward and didn't do anything but that during your waking hours, when you would die, if we came and interviewed on your deathbed and say, did you finish? You would not have finished studying about the chariot that Ezekiel explains just in the first chapter of Ezekiel. Just one chapter, explaining the chariot. You would spend the rest of your life studying this stuff, and I know people who study the chariot. And believe me, they've gotten nowhere. They've been doing it for decades now. And the chariots, I don't think a person in this room would stay sane. If you did stay sane, you'd probably come out a heretic. Wait, did I just say that? So I'm not sure a person would live. I'm not sure you'd live, meaning you might have a cardiac arrest. If you lived, you might come out crazy. You'd likely come out crazy. If you didn't go crazy, you'd probably come out a heretic. Because, why? Because of the things you would see would be so powerful and so mind-blowing, so overwhelming, that you would say, that thing you saw is running creation. And therefore there's no God. So you're a heretic now. Because you saw something so big running so much of this world that you'd just say, oh, okay, I guess he's in charge, you know. That's what you would do. And so there's like not a person alive today who could go really all the way with it, all the way with the chariot studies, and walk out of there unscathed. And the simplest handmaid, just like walking across the seafloor, was seeing that, and that was nothing compared to Mount Sinai. So we're talking about the volume of filter was way down for the splitting of the sea, and then God just went even more down. And when it went more down for Mount Sinai, the Jewish people approached Moses after the second commandment and said to him, like, we're out, man. Like, we don't want any more of this stuff. And Moses said to them, you don't understand. Like, God's trying to, like, set you up for all time. For all time. You know what your history's going to be like? You know what you're all going to be going through? Like, he's trying to create a collective unconsciousness. Did I say that? He's trying to create a collective consciousness. It's really unconscious, but a collective consciousness for a people that he's going to protect. If you call that protection, but protect through the biggest hell of tunneling through history with all the Gentiles, the 70 wolves surrounding a sheep throughout all of history, to have you somehow presentable at the end of days, as if it's about you, which it's not, by the way. It's not about us. I know Jews love to say, like, the whole creation is about it. It's about Hashem. He's just going to have us around as witnesses to the truth of the whole system. You get that? You get what I'm saying? We're nothing but witnesses he'll present at the end. You think God's that interested in us? He likes us. You can even say he loves us. But we're a little bit disappointing. You know? Imagine the Jewish people were your wife. I personally would be divorced a long time ago. Name a Jew. Name a Jew that you'd be happy if he or she were your wife. I mean, just me, like, you might think, well, the rabbi, you know, wouldn't the rabbi be like, wouldn't he be someone worth having as a wife, you know? I mean, imagine I go to bed every night and there's a digital counter, like a red digital, like old school counter on this side, and there's a red old school counter on that side, and it's going through like the seconds of the day, and it gets to 24 at midnight. And the left side is how much I thought about God, and the right side is the time of God creating me. How'd I do each night? How many seconds? Was there a second of the 24 hours where I wasn't directly being created from nothing to something, nothing to something, nothing to something, strobing into existence from absolute nothing into something, to have this experience with you right now? Was there ever a moment where God wasn't fully invested? Not a moment. How would I do on the counter?
But it's not an effort for him, and for us it's an effort. It's not created.
I understand, but he created people to experience him. And he created the Jewish people to be this, like, you know, treasured nation, this Am Segula, this light unto the world. And we're like at one of our lowest depths right now. Since World War II, we are like, right now, in the eyes of the world, we are detested. You understand? We are not. I was just at a jazz club in downtown LA, and I was on my way to the jazz club, 2 in the morning, walking around downtown LA. I had no idea if this was even safe, and I'm going full Hasidic, and I'm walking through downtown LA, and I'm going to a jazz club to, you know, just hear some live jazz, and I just got to mention this because I haven't told this to anyone, but I found an old African man sitting on the floor, and when he saw me approach, he just kind of looked up like that. He didn't really meet my eyes, but he said, "Could I have $1? Just want $1." And of course, I'm coming straight out of Jerusalem, and I just sat right down on the floor. I sat right down on the sidewalk, right across from him. So he was kind of shocked that I did that, because he's just been asking for $1 for whoever walks by at 2 in the morning. Where not a lot of people out. And when he saw my face, he was shocked. He sees my payas, sees my kippah, sees my beard, and his eyes roll up in his, maybe let's close the door, there's too many people right now walking by. His eyes roll up in his head, and he just starts like speaking out about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he's just talking about the forefathers now. He's not looking at me. I'm sitting kind of a little I'm across from him, but a little to the left, so I can get a little closer to him. And he's just kind of looking up and just speaking of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Every once in a while he looks at me. And I said, "Forget that, man. I'm giving this guy $100. Because the guy's on the street. It's like, let me give him $100. So I open up my wallet. There's no money in my wallet. So I walk up to these rather rich-looking people outside a marquee of a major concert that just let out. And so I go up to these people, and there happened to be a horn player I knew there. I said, "Dude, you got $100?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think so." So he's pulling out $100. I'm gonna quick pay him, and and we go to the guy to give him $100. So we get to the African man, and I'm like, "Here's $100, man." And he goes, "I don't want $100. I asked you for $1." And I look over I don't have $1 either. I just flown in. I just got to America. I have no American money. I have shekels. Wasn't going to give him shekels. So I said to my friend, "You got $1?" He's like, "I got $1." And he gave him the $1, and he says, "God bless you." By the way, I tried to push the 100 on him. I didn't just leave it at that. Nothing doing. I get to the jazz club. They were not expecting in the jazz club a guy who looks like me either. So I got a lot of people coming up to me, asking me all kinds of questions. But eventually, I got pulled into a booth because there was an Arab Muslim in the booth. And this whole time, I'm thinking like America's not safe. I'm watching riots, protesters. This whole escapade in downtown LA is. I was a little on edge. I'm like. Well, what's going to happen here? I found out what's going to happen is nothing, other than good jazz and a lot of nice people. So it turns out that I think the media is skewing it's skewing the proportions, meaning it's true things are happening, but it's skewing the proportions. So, because I really met a lot of friendly people, including the Muslim who pulls me into his booth with all his friends around and starts having a whole talk about the Palestinians with me. Anyway, but what we got to at the end, which really blew his mind, when I was done, he was like, "I'm going to have to really think about this." But by the time I walked out of his booth, he was like, I was saying to him that this has nothing to do with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are the most recent representatives over the last 300 years of people whose job is to wake up the Jewish people to their mission to be a light unto the nations. And inasmuch as we are not that light, we get reminded. And this has nothing to do with Palestinians. Who are these Palestinians? They're nothing but the most recent version of, hey, these Jews should be doing their job. And so he was more or less satisfied, didn't know what to think. He said he'd have to think about it. And I got out of the booth and whatever. But we're like, this whole ego that the Jewish people are what it's all about, we are definitely super, super, super important to this whole thing, especially Kabbalistically and especially understanding the narrative of creation, but we're really just going to be the witnesses at the end for God's glory. This is all about the light in a highly filtered situation that is going to shine through at the end of days, when the ego of the nations is finally, when they're taken down to their knees. You understand, whenever America's nice to Netanyahu, whenever they're dealing with Netanyahu, they're going good with Netanyahu, giving him his weapons, whatever, don't be that excited. Don't be that excited. All it's doing is pushing it out a little, pushing out history a little further now. But you don't think America's going to be taken down to its knees? The whole story is the biggest, most powerful country in civilization in the world is taken down to its knees, and then the Jews, you know, come out. So what's the most powerful country in the world? There's a couple of them, but still holding on by a thread is the U.S. So you want to be friends with Israel? Okay, God will preserve you, because remember the original rules: those who bless him will be blessed, those who curse him will be cursed. So is it any wonder that there's all these American Congress people and various possible presidents cursing Israel? Is there any wonder? We're getting towards the end. And so all these nations who are forgetting those lines in the Torah, that whoever blesses us will be blessed, whoever curses us will be cursed. This is what I say, by the way, when I get anti-Semitic comments on the street. It doesn't happen too often, but it's happened a few times. I always just say to them, whoever blesses us will be blessed, whoever curses us will be cursed. You know, it's your own fate, bro. Sealed your own fate. So, you know, if America wants to keep blessing us, it'll push things out a little further for them. But if you know history, I doubt it's going to stay this way. If you know the history of the Jewish people, I don't think we're going to finish with like one friendly wolf. Remember, we're a sheep among 70 wolves. We're not going to have one wolf with like a little bonnet, you know. A wolf in a bonnet's a wolf. Okay? It's like, it gets a little closer to the sheep, but you know, it's not going to become friends with the sheep. So chances are, you know, we're in for a very extremely special ride coming up, and it's our job now is to be the Am Segula. We got to be that nation. We got to be the treasured nation. We got to be those people that God intended us to be that representative of Hashem in this world, and to bring redemption in any way we can. But in the end, it's just going to be Hashem's glory. Hakol bara l'chvoid. The whole world was only created for His glory. That's it. And we're just going to be the witnesses at the end. The question is, will we make it? Meaning we, yes, the Jews will make it, but will you make it? No promise individually. So let's do our best, each one of us, to be the holiest Jew anyone ever met. People should see you on a weekday and say good Shabbos. No better compliment than being seen on a weekday and someone says just good Shabbos, and then realize, oh, it's not Shabbos. You should be that holy. If people accidentally say good Shabbos to you in the middle of the week. Shkoyach. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're going to be doing this every day. Thursday's going to be the last day of me. I don't know if they'll do someone else next week, but Thursday's going to be the last day of me, just because I got to be in Lakewood. I'm just there. I'm not missing Shabbos. I like Shabbos in Yerushalayim, so I'm doing Shabbos here. Flying Motzi Shabbos. I'm going to fly back Erev Shabbos. So I'm not here just Sunday through Thursday of next week. But we're going to be doing this every day this week. Every class will be its standalone experience. And I don't mind leaving the class up to you. If you want to come in with the title, with the subject, with the question, that'll be the class. And I can move mine to the next day, because I'm here for you, I'm not here for me. And we'll get started that next week on Sunday. It's going to be Sunday through Thursday, every day of the week, unless I am out the country. Shalom, everyone. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.